Yeah.
I guess my last question is, what happens if, as a result of all these votes, Rhinebeck cannot get into the town of, into the village of Mamaroneck, the rest of the village, as a coterminous town village, and it can't be taken by the town of Mamaroneck? Do they become the town of Rye then?
That would require special action by the state, but it really does become a tail wags the dog sort of question. Yeah. And again, I think it's part of our role here is to answer that question, yeah, and to not only identify the various moving parts in the 3 or 2.5 villages, but to document the process behind having different moving parts, and yeah, going down different paths simultaneously. But you're absolutely right. I mean, the Rhinebeck portion presents a challenge if we're going to go for an all-for-one, one-for-all vote to create the coterminus and to dissolve the town of Rye.
Okay. Thank you.
Hi, I'm New York State Assemblyman George Latimer, and I have the privilege of probably being in and out of every one of these communities and a few others, hourly by hourly as well as day by day. So a lot of familiar faces in the room, and it's good to see you all in one room. First of all, let me compliment you on making this effort amongst these communities. I know each of you personally. We've talked about this personally. And my colleague, I don't know if she's been introduced already. I'll reintroduce her if she hasn't. Sandy Galiff is in the room, Assemblywoman from Ossining, and she deserves a round of applause. Sandy and I have been good friends for 20-plus years. We've served at 2 levels of government. We always have a very respectful disagreement about consolidation, bottom-up, top-down. And this meeting is an example of what bottom-up consolidation discussions are about. Now, we've passed a couple of bills in the state legislature in the last couple of years to allow certain things between towns and villages. However, some of the comments, Mario's comment most recently, here's the nub of the problem. The interest of you living in one of these communities may not be the same interest as somebody who lives in another community. It may be advantageous as a resident of Rye Brook to do X, and it may not be advantageous if you live in the village of Mamaroneck if Rye Brook does X. That's why these things don't happen easily. So when you have a study and you bring in professionals who are experienced in this and they look at these situations and they say, in Seneca Falls, where there's a central village and a town around it, it worked. You look in places in Erie County where there have been referendums between villages and towns and it hasn't passed because each person goes into that referendum and says, what's in my interest? Pete Feynman, a good friend of mine, said a couple of minutes ago about what's the role of the city of Rye. Susanna Keith and I are residents of the city of Rye. She serves on the council now. I did serve on the council. Peter, if Susanna and I were to talk to you about how people in the city of Rye would answer your question, it would be that the people who live in the city of Rye are happy to be an independent city, and that benefits the residents of the city of Rye. So the question isn't what benefits you living on Betsy Brown Road on this side of the dotted line or that side of the dotted line, but can you find a commonality of interest that's good enough for enough people so that you move forward with one strategy or the other. That's why I compliment Joe and the village mayors, because in most places you're not even looking for that. But when you look for it, keep in mind there are some very practical realities. Before we talked a little bit about taxes. If you pay $20,000 a year in property taxes, if you pay less, more, multiple, or reduce, if you pay $20,000 a year in property taxes, your combined village-town taxes are still roughly 20% of your total bill. Total. Village and town, however you construct it. That's $4,000 out of your $20,000. The remaining $16,000 are a combination of county and school districts. And the study we're talking about appropriately deals with municipal structures and municipal costs. So if someone sits here and says, boy, we're going to consolidate, wouldn't this be a good idea? Know your numbers. Now, I gave you a general number. It doesn't exactly apply every single place exactly like that. But generally, municipal taxes, in whatever construct, is roughly 20% of your total tax bill. Fair statement. So someone says, my taxes, Goldie started it off, my taxes are killing me. They're killing me. Yeah, they're killing me. They're killing me too. But remember, we're talking about 20% of your taxes with this discussion. There is still a separate discussion to be had about school districts and the county government. Let me also say that at the end of the day, the villain in the room would be New York State. Because New York State, as every other 50 states, creates the structures of government. I was just in Massachusetts. I'm sorry if I'm going overly long. You can always do this if you think I'm going too long. When I stop being interested, just do this. I was in Massachusetts about a week ago, or 10 days ago, for a conference. Massachusetts does not have village government, and it got rid of county governments. So all you have in Massachusetts is the state, and you have 351 municipal governments, which are mostly towns and to some extent cities. What did I hear in the room? Boy, you guys still have county government. We need to work regionally. We're working in 351 separate deliveries for veteran services, 351 separate ways of delivering health care, but not health care, public health, because they don't have a county health department or a county veteran services thing. In Massachusetts, they see their problem, as I heard it in the room, it's one meeting, as 351 communities all providing the same service. Can't we coordinate? And they look at county government, and I'm telling them, having served in county government, with Sandy, I hear people saying, what do we need county government for? What do we need village government for? It's too much government. We have yet to find in this world a perfect way to deliver government. There really is no perfect world. This is an effort to see, is there a better way to do it? And I respect that. But for people who walk out of the room and say there's too much government, there's not enough government, it's too much, it comes down to something very simple. How do you benefit in your wallet? That's what you're going to think about this. And if you live in the Rhinebeck section of Mamaroneck, the results of this might be different than if you live in the village of Larchmont, who's not in the room but are affected by whatever these final decisions are made. Let me also say that there is first a professional analysis with options. That's what you're going to do. Then your representative government, that's these folks and the council members and trustees who are in the room, are going to discuss it. You put them in office to discuss these things and to make decisions. In most cases, depending on the end result, there'll be referendums which all of you vote on. But in some of these cases, the state of New York will have to do things. And it will come to the state legislature, which would mean, for the moment, me, 2 years from now, or whatever, 4 years, whatever, whoever's sitting in the state assembly seat and the state senate seat. And we, as Sandy will smile, we will have to deal with other legislators who might not want to see Portchester become a city, even if we want it to be. We may have other parts of the state that may say, we have a problem if you divide up and you have two-town village, so there are other barriers that we're going to have to jump, even after we have the analysis, the representative governments, the referendums. And I only say that to you because why do people hate government so much in general? Because we promise what we don't deliver, we make things sound like it's going to be really better tomorrow, and then it's not, and then you're cynical about it. So I want to be upfront about it. This is a long process. It's a terrific process. You're to be complimented. But let's not us put onto this unrealistic expectations so that we deal with it realistically. I'll close. Joe made a very excellent comment when he told the story of Manny Hanny becoming Chemical, becoming Chase, and now JP Morgan Chase. And there is a comparative story as well. Companies that are bought by a parent company and then divided into pieces and are more profitable when you take this division and you sell it off to that company and this division off to that company. That was part of my corporate experience in life. There is no singular rule for profitability. It is whatever works given the dynamics of the asset, the moment that you're in, and the decision makers. Having said that, I compliment you greatly. I look forward to the study. If I can be of any help, bring me up.
Joe, I'd like to, first of all, I want to thank Assemblyman Latimer. Again, I think I presume, I certainly expect that most of us will share the horrific lack of bipartisan approach in Washington. I mean, I think all of the stock market has seen the effects, not of getting the debt ceiling passed, but certainly a divided government. So I want to thank Assemblyman Latimer for all the hard work he's done for the town of Rye. He's passed through groundbreaking legislation, groundbreaking legislation to address our certiorari problems as did Representative Gale as well. Passed in the Assembly groundbreaking legislation for certiorari challenges. And so I want to thank you.
Thank you.
But hold on, but I know there's always, and I think we've always worked together in a bipartisan fashion. I really think it's serious-minded people dealing with our communities in a serious-minded way, and Assemblyman Latimer has always done that. I did, however...
Thanks for the battlefield almost promotion there.
I did, however, want us to make a couple other points, though, and I think you know, first of all, I want to agree with Assemblyman Latimer on the specific point he makes, and that is, this is not going to solve your tax burden. This effort, this movement is not going to solve your tax burden. So I don't want to oversell what we're trying to do, and I want to thank you for supporting our effort. I did, however, want to make a couple of points. A couple of things we've looked at. One, Greenwich, I can see Greenwich from my house. Their taxes are 25%. That means 75% lower than our taxes. Now, clearly there's part of that, so they have higher tax revenues. No village government, no county government. So that tax burden is 75% lower. Now, I thought it had to do with government. You know what we found? What we found was they've basically run their government over the last 10 years in a way where they didn't increase expenditures by more than 3% for 10 years. Now, in New York State, the average tax increase is 7%. So that means over 10 years, our taxes are 50% higher, just because they manage their government better than we did. So my point is, small efforts can lead to big results. I don't need to tell anybody in this room, Westchester County is the highest property tax county in the nation. That's unsustainable. I don't need to tell one senior in this room that the tax burden is unsustainable. To do nothing would be unconscionable. We're the 50th. We just updated our report. We used to be 49th in terms of a place to do business. 49th. Actually, we had to update it because we're now 50th. 50th. New York State. And the highest property tax state in the nation. We trade between New Jersey. Who's going to be the highest and not? So it's unsustainable. I'm a Wall Street guy. I project cash flows into the future. I don't need to tell anybody in this room it's unsustainable. All these levels of government. Now, we have not changed New York State government since the invention of the light bulb. The invention of the light bulb. Now, I think Assemblyman Matter is absolutely correct. I know we share the desire, as does everybody on this panel, to reduce our tax burden. But I do want to make clear that it's fundamental that we change things now so that in 10, 20 years, things are better. And I got to tell you, the other thing that's just to finish, the other thing is the biggest and best and most encouraging thing to me, as Joe said earlier, is the community conversation. It's not going to be anyone on this panel that decides things. It's you. And I know Mayor Pilla has done everything he could to reduce expenditures. I know Mayor Feinstein has done everything she could to reduce expenditures. Mayor Rosenblatt has done everything he could to reduce expenditures. And we're really struggling and working very, very hard to reduce your tax burden and expenditures in our communities. And so it's an effort where we're trying to work together to provide you with information so that you can make an informed decision. So I want to thank everybody for coming. I want to thank you.
And thank you, Joe. And let me just add one other point to the point you made. On the level of taxing, the biggest difference between New York and Connecticut and taxation level is the state of New York and the state of Connecticut. I respect the fact that Greenwich has been able to keep their taxes low. There are other communities in Connecticut that have had difficulty doing that because they don't have some of the affluence that Greenwich does. Sitting next to you, Norm Rosenblum is struggling very hard to keep his tax levels low, and he has a volunteer fire department, but he also has capital needs that perhaps Joan does not have in Rye Brook. The difference between the state of New York and what it provides and the state of Connecticut and what it provides is the reason why New York taxes are higher. And it would also be true for New Jersey. And I would argue that it's not the numbers of structures of governments, it's the level of the services. And the services primarily being things like Medicaid, in which New York State has the most extensive Medicaid program in the nation, and the fact that New York State requires county government through your property taxes to pay for a portion of Medicaid. That's the single biggest unfunded state mandate. And Sandy and I lived with that for respectively 13 years, not overlapped all the time. But that is a debate. And now that debate isn't going to happen in this room. Let's be honest. That debate happens in a room with people from Brooklyn and the Bronx and Buffalo. So we know in Westchester what we deal with. But when Sandy and I and others go to Albany, we deal with people from all over the state. And in the Bronx, anybody here have any friends in the Bronx? Raise your hand if you have a friend in the Bronx. Do they have a property tax problem in the Bronx? No. Why? Totally different structure for the way they finance their schools and their municipal governments. So we have this debate, and I'm happy to have the conversations with you all about the things at the state level. Let me compliment you on doing this, and I'm with you on this, and we'll go forward. Thank you.
I just wanted to address something that the mayor of Mamaroneck said about the village of Larchmont and Josh Mandel. Josh Mandel, as mayor of Larchmont, is looking out for what is in the best interests of Larchmont. Not having a study that includes Larchmont and the town of Mamaroneck and proposing anything regarding the village of Mamaroneck and the Rhinebeck section seems, out of tune. The same kind of study that you're doing here for the town of Rye should be done for the town of Mamaroneck to figure out where we go. And not including them might not provide the best solution for what happens with Rhinebeck. Certainly I work with Josh Mandel on the Tri-Municipal Committee that I spoke about earlier. Josh has very different ideas about what's valuable to him and his community than I have about what's valuable to my community, being the entire village of Mamaroneck. I don't think that making the unincorporated section of the town of Mamaroneck and the village of Larchmont, a coterminous community, and looking at the village of Mamaroneck solely as a coterminous community is the best solution. Or maybe it might not be the best solution. But it certainly warrants the same level of study that's going on here for the town of Mamaroneck. And the fact that the village of Mamaroneck has most of the business and most of the ratables seems to me to lend the idea that we have the commercial property that should be driving the conversation with a lot of the other communities. So I just think that's something that needs to be evaluated, and I think the preconceived notion that seems to be weighed out here about the village of Mamaroneck becoming a coterminous town village really needs to be explored much further, because the fact that you'd only be saving 10% possibly by removing the town layer of government doesn't seem to be valuable enough to go through a process like this. We need to really cut out a layer of government, and the one way to do that is to either remove the towns or remove the villages.
Just a quick comment, John. There are no preconceived notions here. This is just one answer to a pragmatic approach that the gentleman who will probably come up to speak next again is that how is something to be passed? Whatever this committee comes up with will be presented to the voters, and the only potential to have them have the best vote is to have as many potential possibilities, and that's exactly why we're doing it. So there are no preconceived notions being put forth, and do not fall into that trap. It's wide open.
I just want to add, just to clarify, we also don't know if anything is going to be brought forth to the voters. We don't know the outcome of this particular study. As said before, there are no preconceived notions. Once we get the results of the study and have a dialogue with our communities, we may understand that everyone wants to maintain the town of Rye the way it is. But once again, to reiterate what I said before, and I think all of us, this has been talked about, and Mario Nardi knows only for so long that's been talked about. But this is the time that we have to discuss efficiencies and layers of government, because, let's face it, we're in very difficult economic straits right now. And to be quite honest, we have the state fund this through an efficiency grant. And I think it's one, and all of us, I think are visionaries. We're looking to the future to see, can things be done more cost efficiently and better for our communities and our residents.
I just had a quick question. George Latimer referred to the fact that the last word is going to be in Albany because they have to approve the coterminous town villages. My question is, do they do that after we have the referendum or before? Can you petition them to vote on it in advance so that we don't go through the additional expense and bother of having the referendum if they're not going to pass it, they're not going to agree with it?
That's a great question. Part of laying out that process and laying out options is our job for you. I will point out that it is not, there are likely to be some options we look at that would require some action by Albany. I can tell you right now that there are options we will look at that the community will be able to pursue on their own without having to rely on Albany to take any formal action. consolidating or further sharing services in particular functional areas are one example. You don't restructure the system from a municipal perspective, but maybe you go from 3 service providers to 2 or 3 to 1 in a particular functional area. You can do that all as residents through your elected officials without Albany having any say on it. So Albany's involvement is a distinct possibility and perhaps a requirement in the case of some options. It also, on the other hand, wouldn't be essential for certain other options we'll look at. Now, in terms of those options where action from Albany would be required, part of our job is to lay out that process for you. I'll give you one quick example, and I don't think anybody's alluded to this yet today, but the town and village of Ossining have recently moved forward to consolidate courts at the town. That required some action by the state, but there was a specific process that was laid out in coordination with the state so that the state sign-off was granted perfectly in line with the implementation process to allow those 2 municipalities to merge their courts on schedule. I think that takes effect January 1. Part of our job here will be to lay out that process for you and let you know whose sign-off needs to happen when, and hopefully to facilitate that process if it's the direction the community ultimately decides to go.
I think that the most in the community would probably desire the coterminous villages, and that would require state sanction. That is, the legislature has to vote on it. And the question is, do they vote after the referendum, or can you get them to vote before so you don't go through the effort if they're not going to approve it?
I don't know the answer to that question at this time, but that's something that we certainly would look at in coordination with folks in Albany.
When this report is finalized, I intend to meet, and I'm sure the Senator Oppenheimer will too, will meet with the principals involved and will determine what a legislative companion timeline will be. So we'll figure that out once the options are out there and the community decides which of these options they want to pursue.
Thank you, Jared. Thank you.
I'm happy to announce I'll be the last one. So I'm hoping to get a big ovation on that. But Supervisor Carr mentioned that this could take a while. Assemblyman Latimer said it could take a while, which is understandable. It's government. Government moves slow. What did get the biggest ovation was when we talked about assessments and getting those right. That is critical. The town of Rye today handles your assessments. Supervisor Carver said, this is not going to solve the world. It's only a certain percentage. He's absolutely right. What he can also do, and what the town of Rye can do today, is fix everyone's assessments. That's what actually matters today, that we can do today. I just want to leave on that note. Let's not lose focus on fixing those before we do any combination, any dissolving, any coterminous. Get the assessments right. That is critical to do today. And absolutely. I mean, you can't successfully do anything without proper assessments. So, thank you.
I'll throw it back to you guys for conclusion, but I just want to make 2 points in conclusion. Number one, thank you everybody for coming this morning. I think this was very productive. I learned a lot. I'm sure the steering committee did as well, and we'll incorporate that as we go forward in the study. The second piece is, and again, I can't stress this enough, check out that website. Please submit comments, sign up for those email alerts. It's www.cgr.org/rytown. And we'll have all sorts of information on there about the study and keep that updated as we go forward. Link through the municipal websites as well. So go to the town or any of the village websites and you'll be able to access that.
We're going to conclude this evening.
Is there one more question?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Yes, B, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Actually, I don't have a question. I just want to make a comment. I want to commend you people for doing what you're doing. This thought is something that I have lived in Portchester numerous years, 36 years of what used to be unincorporated area on Garibaldi, which is now Rye Brook. Many people through the years always said, why do we need Rye Town? Believe me, we would say, what the heck do they do? All they do is take care of a park, collect our taxes, and take care of Crawford Park. And it's actually true. And I always personally thought it was an extra layer of government. Maybe it isn't. What you're doing is great, because I was given a quote recently by Sam Terenzi, my friend, and it was from Teddy Roosevelt, who said, "The heroes in this world are the ones who make the attempt to do something. They're the heroes. The critics will always be there. And you need them too, because sometimes they come up with good ideas, and many times they just are letting off steam and don't get up there and speak out. But what you're doing is great. It may work. The process is going to take a long, long time. I may not ever see it happen. But it's a wonderful effort, and I commend you for it. And whatever these gentlemen come up with, they're going to be the ones that are going to tell us whether there's a minus or a plus. And there are questions, and a lot of things have to be settled before it's done. But again, thank you so much for trying. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I think that was a good way to end. I'm going to give my fellow representatives on the steering committee an opportunity to speak, but I just wanted to make one observation, or two observations. One was a gentleman said the fact that there are not some younger people in the audience today, and I think you all look fairly young, but I do realize, and we realize, the fact that a Saturday may not be the best day, especially for those people who have young children and have sporting events and other commitments, and we recognize that, but we felt that what we would do is do a Saturday, and then we would look at other days in the future for the second forum. We understood that September was a particularly difficult month, especially for children going back to school and back to school nights and all of the other activities. But we as a group felt it was really important that we have this kickoff, because this is a way of getting out to the community what we're trying to achieve, what this study is all about. So that was the first comment. The second comment is, I think you now understand why there was a unanimous consent and agreement to have CGR as our professional who's handling this. So, Joe, thank you very much. I'm going to start, we're going to go from left to right for concluding remarks. And thank you once for your attendance today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Feinstein. I just want to thank everyone for coming out today for the start of this very, very important journey. You know, I think it was Assemblyman Latimer who said, what's a good solution for one community may not be good in another. Recognizing that there is no such thing as nirvana, really. I think Webster's definition is a place that may not be achievable. And recognizing that life is about compromise, what we're here doing is trying to look at the options and look at what's win-win. I don't think any of your elected leaders here, or anybody in the state, or any of you voters, is going to vote for something that's bad for any one of you necessarily. So really, we're going to try to lay out all the options and steer this in a direction, if you will, with your input. We're not driving anything, really. It's government of the people. But that comes closest to win-win for all of us in order for us to move forward. So I look forward to and I tell you this, there's no rules of thumb. The smallest government here probably has the smallest per thousand cost per capita per thousand AV. So the train of thought that bigger is cheaper, economies of scale, doesn't always scale that way. So I look forward to the facts. I look forward to the discussion. I look forward to the conclusions. Thank you very much for coming.
I just want to add one other thing, which I think is important. We talked about Washington and the lack of sometimes cooperation. When I look up here, Rybrook, we're nonpartisan. There are people of different parties that sit up here today, and that really shows the level of cooperation among our municipalities. So I really want to thank all of you, the individuals who are sitting here today. It really has been a pleasure as we go down this journey.
Thank you, Mayor Feinstein. In fact, I'd like to pick up, and Willie with the same note. You know, we're very fortunate to have 4 committed elected public officials working very hard to better their communities. So I want to thank Mayor Pilla, Mayor Feinstein, Mayor Rosenblum for their goodwill, good intentions, and hard work. There's no certain outcome here. It's really, as Beaconette has said, an effort to try and do something to improve our community. I also want to thank CGR, Ann and Joe. They are obviously getting paid for this, but for them to take away their Saturday and spend their time with us to try and get as many people here as possible, I want to thank them. When we ran for office 4 years ago, our motto was transparency, integrity, and community. And I know you know that everybody on this board is wholly committed and fully committed to transparency, and that's the first thing. Obviously, we're all trying to exercise our best judgment with integrity. And I think we're also all hopeful that this leads to an improvement in our community. Now, I think improvement's already started, and that is the community conversation. I can't thank each and every one of you enough for coming out today and initiated what I think is an all-important community conversation. No matter how this turns out, let's talk about how we govern ourselves. That's the important point. How are we going to govern ourselves going forward in a very, very difficult and volatile world? You have the website. Continue the conversation. Use the emails. I've read the emails that have come in. Please take full advantage. Send us your comments. Send us your thoughts. It's a dynamic process, and ultimately, the decision is yours. So thank you so much for coming, and have a wonderful weekend.
Speaking last, obviously everything's already been covered, so I don't want to repeat it. I would just say that in general, this is an open process. Nothing has been decided. Nothing will be decided. None of us up here know exactly what will be done after the conclusion that will be put forth to the public for a vote, if in fact it even gets to that point. I just would like to say that I would thank you, the most important part, because we are sitting up here to represent you. And keep that in mind this weekend when we are commemorating 9/11 because of those people that actually made the ultimate sacrifice, and those young men and women that continuously, for whatever reason, this government puts them throughout the world in the armed services. Please keep them in mind, and that this is a democratic process. It's the greatest country in the world, and I thank you for coming because you are the ones that make it possible. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Have a nice weekend.
Thanks, Mayor.